Hello, my name is Adam Winrich, and welcome to the first part of my multi-part series of interviews around Australia. Back in November of 2025, me and Chris Barr spent a couple weeks driving around, meeting up with a bunch of people. This first interview was with a very nice gentleman by the name of Bob Green. We talk about a lot of stuff, how Bob got started with whip cracking, some whip makers that he really admires, and how Bob even convinced Charlie Hassett to start teaching other people how to do the Hassett's Four Corners to make sure that Charlie didn't take that trick with him to the grave. Here's my interview with Bob. Oh, we weren't going to do more than one take. Hey Bob, this will be a little interview we're going to put on YouTube of different people I'm meeting around Australia on this little trip me and Chris Barr are taking. Bob is the first one we're interviewing. So Bob, do me a favor as to tell a little bit about Chris' name, where you're from, how old you are.
Well, my name's Bob Green, Robert Bruce Green to be exact. I'm 76-year-old, going on 77. Pretty happy. I live here in Jimboomba, Queensland. I retired back in 2004 and I've been here ever since, and it's the longest stay I've ever had in one place, Adam, for me. And yeah, I enjoy it. It's a bit different to that cold climate down there in the New England of New South Wales, where we took you last time you were ever out here.
Oh, yeah.
To Glen Innes, and yeah, no, we enjoy it here.
Now, what was your profession?
Well, I held three trades, but mostly I was a qualified sign writer. And after I'd sort of finished my time, I went on the road with horses. I was strapped to the equestrian captain of Australia for a couple of years. And then I got sick and tired of eating the dates off the calendar, and I joined the New South Wales Mounted Police. I was there for 6 years, and then I went to the country and always had a desire to go to the bush and work there. And I spent 33 years in the police force, but most of my time was in the New England of New South Wales, and it's a lovely area. And you know, it sort of got me into the cowboy way a fair bit, although I cowboyed a bit when I was sort of growing up. Through my time as a sign writer, I'd go away to rodeos and camp drafts every weekend. But later on, and I always had a passion for stock whips, and I was very fortunate, more fortunate than a lot of people, that I had the benefit of getting friendships with very good whip makers in the early days, like George Vogt, and had a good teacher in Steve Laird.
How do you spell Steve's name?
Steve, Steve Laird, Laird, Steve Laird. You know, I had four very good horsemen that were a big influence on my life, to be honest. The first one was John Kelly, the fellow in that photograph there. He was a great horseman. The second one was a reinsman who was in the Hall of Fame. His name is Charlie Parsons. He was a great all-round horseman. Then Colin McTaggart, the great bronc rider in Australia, who I travel with a fair bit, and who's still my friend today. He's 91 years of age, but he doesn't think he is, I can assure you. And Larry Mahan in America, who was someone I always wanted to meet, and when I did, we formed a great friendship, and I'd go back there and help him with his horses, and he was a great horseman as well as being a great bronc rider. But all those fellas all had an interest in whips as well. And I suppose when I got into the New England, you know, my passion for stock whips and for leather work in particular just grew. And I was very fortunate that, you know, I met Jim and Fiona Wilkes, and we formed a club called the Northern New South Wales Whip Crackers and Platters Club. And we ended up having a great championship and a great event. And then...
And that's the event that I would have went to in Glen
Yeah,
yeah.
And then, you know, we had a plaiting competition as well. And then one day, one of the premier platters now in Australia, Chris Barr, came to me and said, I think we should have an Australian championship. And we did. And a couple of whip makers that really assisted us in the early stages of the club were John McMaster and Morris Doohan, who actually were full-time platters. And, you know, had a very good client base with stock whips. And so the Australian titles were called the Doohan McMaster Trophy. And from day one, I was fortunate enough to go to Queensland and meet Lindsay Packer from Packer Leather. And Lindsay sponsored our plaiting championship, and it still goes today, the Packer Leather Australian Plaiting Championships. And if you're fortunate enough to get your name on the Doohan McMaster Trophy, I consider that you're a master platter. And there's one person in particular that has his name on there more than anyone else, and that's Chris Barr. And it's a credit to him and all the professionalism that this man generates now. And I know the hard yards and the criticism he accepted in his early stages of his career, and to be where he is today is just a credit to him.
So this is a set of Chris Barr sock whips I'm holding right here, just for fun.
Yeah.
So to back up some stuff I want to ask you about. So you told me before you learned whip cracking from Steve Laird. So can you tell me a little bit about what he taught you?
Well, I can tell you how it came about. I was at John Kelly's property called Oakvale Upper Horton. I call it the Valley of the Horsemen. They're all horsemen in that valley. And he was the greatest show rider we've ever had in this country. And a lovely fellow, great mate of mine. And he came out one day and he had about 9 Cecil Henderson whips in his hand. And he said, oh, we'll do a bit of whip cracking out in his front yard of his property. And he made a comment to me. He said, they're a dangerous thing in the wrong hands. And I took it on board and I went, yeah, they possibly are. And I don't like the statement, but you know, he's still a lovely fellow and a great mate. I really miss him. Anyway, I went, I'll fix you in that statement. And I knew how good Steve Laird was. He taught Johnny Brady. He was a great whip cracker, a showman. You know, he was in with a lot of circuses and he was a good performer. He was a good bronc rider too. Anyway, I went to Steve Laird and I said, can you teach me how to crack whips properly? He said, I think so. So I had to put up with a show every time I went there before it even started, give me a demonstration of how good he was, and I knew he was good. Anyway, he started buying whips from Victor McClary and Ronnie Orman pitting Castle in the Valley, and I started buying a lot of red hides as well. And he taught me how to crack whips, and in particular double-handed. Then one day I went back to John's and he got his whips out again, and that was a mistake. I said, oh, you better give me a couple of them. And I gave him a little exhibition. He said, who taught you? And I said, Steve Laird. And he went, yeah, I kind of figured you'd do that. He said, you've got a bit of grit in you, haven't you, somewhere? And I went, yeah, maybe. But anyway, that was the start of things. But John Kelly had a tremendous clown group, and that's a picture up there of them leading Sydney show. The Kelly brothers, they were called. And fortunately for me, I also collected belts, and I've got both his John Kelly and John Sutton, the Kelly brothers. Both their wives gave them to me when they passed on, and things that, you know, you cherish as you get going. I know that you're an avid collector of a lot of things. You've got the best whip collection in the world, and possibly flintlock pistols and a few other things. But
a quick question. So once you learned you learned whip cracking from Steve Laird. About what year was that? And then once he taught you, did you do any competitions?
Yeah, I did. That would have been in the very early 1970s, I would
Early
think.
70s.
About 71, 72. Yeah, well, I competed a little bit. I won our championship at Glen Innes one year, and I was pretty fortunate. Maybe it was an easy year, I don't know. But for a long period of time, I used to practice for hours of a day like you do. It's something that you become compelled to it, and then you pick the standard up in whips. And I was very fortunate that Morris Doohan sponsored me and my daughter as well for a while there, and he's been a great friend all the way through, Morris Doohan. It's been tremendous to me, and I've sent some up-and-coming platters to him at times, and they've all gone on to be great platters. And I was fortunate, Tony Nugent was there at the time at Morris's, and he's a wonderful platter. I think I've had a fortunate life, really, in ways, because it's like you and Chris. I've been involved in things I've loved, and even the police force was very good for me in the bush. It opened a lot of doors for me and got me to meet a lot of nice people and friends. They're not all baddies out there, and yeah, it was just a good opening for me.
What were some of the tricks you learned or that you would do in competition, like when you were practicing? Like some of your favorite tricks, stuff you would use in competition?
I like to volley a bit, so I'd like to volley overhead and do things like that. And I think I was one of the early guys to ever, see the Queensland crossover, which was a Willie Goff trick, but he'd gone to Canada. And, I can remember showing Chris Beck the Queensland crossover and things like that. And I think we were fortunate that we had guys like, we had Fiona there, who was a tremendous whip cracker, Fiona Wilkes. I think no lady will ever get near her. I have a very high opinion of her and a very high opinion of you. And I was fortunate that I went and saw Charlie Hassett when no one could get near him, they said, "You won't get near this man, he's a recluse." I just went and saw him, and I wanted him to come to Glen Innes, and I approached him, and he said, "I don't want to teach anyone." I said, "What do you want to do? Take 4 corners to the grave with you?" I said, "You can't be cruel like that." I said, "You want people to come out with Hassett's 4 corners?" I said, "Go and show them." I said, "These people want to meet you." And I said, "We want you to judge." And we're very fortunate. We got Charlie, and I think it was a good thing for Charlie as much as what it was for everyone else that was involved. We were very fortunate.
What was the year that you got Charlie to sort of stop being recluse and come out to the competition in Glen Innes?
Yeah.
What year was that?
Well, that would have been very early in the 70s, I would imagine.
Oh, way back then.
Yeah, sometime there. You know, there's a lot of good whip crackers around, we know. And, you know, it becomes a very competitive thing. But all we're on about, and our, you know, all the fundamentals that we ever had with that club and our organisation, were to keep the tradition of whip cracking and plaiting alive in this country. And, you know, when I spoke to Lindsay Packer, I said, that's our intention. That's all we have. That's what we want to do. And today, I'm of the opinion now, today, the standard of plaiting and whips in this country has found a new level. You know, you take the likes of most of the guys that are on that tray, on that, you know, you've got Dennis Gardner, Peter Thorndike, Billy Glasgow, there's just Kenny Webster, Wardy, there's heaps and heaps of guys, some multiple times, but none more than Chris. But, you know, there's a lot of other good platters like Russell Schultz and Tony Nugent. There's a very good up-and-coming guy now, Mark Rudolph, and he's been tutored by Chris. All these guys, you know, are really coming on, but the standard now, you have a look at these sort of whips.
Yeah.
They're a competition pair of whips that you have there. And the balance, I'm sure there's only about an ounce difference in both whips. They're that perfectly made. And, you know, the hinge is perfect, the shape's perfect, everything about them, you know. They're just lovely whips. Who wouldn't want to own those? I can tell you, they're fantastic. And, you know, I just think that it's great, and you know, there are a really good nucleus of people that are involved in plaiting and whip cracking today. There's not too many arguments. As you know, everyone knows and everyone realises they're hard competitions. But I think that you have set a standard now, and people have to follow it, particularly with your routine and how you do it overhead, and it just flows. Everything's good about it, you know. I enjoy watching you crack whips all the time now.
Thanks.
You just, you know, you came out here, I can remember in the early days, and I thought, boy, this guy's got a lot of potential. You didn't, you just went on with it. And what you've done for plaiting and whip cracking in the world is unbelievable. And I've said that to Chris Barr on many occasions. And I think I'm very fortunate to have the friends that I have. That's how I look at it.
That's the Bob, yeah, is an avid collector of many things, but that's probably his most important collection, is collecting important people or talented people, having them in your life.
Yeah, and I think I'm just blessed with the friends that I've had, Adam, and you're in there. And you know, when I look back at it all, you know, Chris and Morris and everyone, it's been a great job. It's been a great ride. You know, that committee we had at Glen Innes, we had the best president, Jim, Fiona, and you know, Fiona Wilkes, fantastic whip cracker. I never get sick and tired of watching her, I can tell you. You know, a lot of great people involved and a great committee. We had a great committee. I can never recall one cross word. But we never took anyone for granted either on that committee. They just, everyone knew their job, the Mabbotts, you know, the Hollingworths. Just, it was a great family to be associated with. And it was a great competition, and we were very fortunate that, you know, that Hillary and Dot, when we shut it down at Glen Innes, we moved all the championships to Clifton, and Hillary and Dot O'Leary have been fantastic, and Patrick and his wife, just lovely people. You know, he's a great cattle judge, and he's a great fella, and you know, we had exactly the same view about keeping tradition alive. That's all it was. And that's all it's ever going to be. And I just think the standard today, when you see work like that and the whip crackers we've got, and the junior competitors coming on now, terrific. And the good thing about it is that people like yourself pass on your knowledge, and I know Chris has with the schools that he runs and all the rest. Just a great thing for whip cracking and plaiting.
As a parting words, any advice you would give to people out there on the internet watching this video, as far as if you're a whip cracker or a whip platter, any parting advice you would give? I think just practice slow. It's like, you know, I had a lot of years training boxers, believe it or not. And, you know, my advice to them was train hard, fight easy, or box easy. I don't call it fighting much, I call it boxing. And I had amateurs. But, you know, I think with whip cracking, just get a nice pair of whips that don't send you to the moon, but you know, even a nice pair of red hides or something just to start with, and then work your way up. And then when you get to a certain standard, buy a nice pair of whips. You don't need a heap, but just practice nice and steady. Look at the guys and just watch. You know, it's all about, Charlie Hassett would tell you, it's knuckles up, knuckles down. And that's pretty much what it is. Well, no matter what way you want to crack a whip, you've got to go that way. You know, there's a few standard procedures, like if you just practice your volleying, but Charlie Hassett always used to say to get your volley up high, not down low. And you know, with most of your overhead things, that if you get up high and you volley high, then you can go and change and come round and do whatever you want. And that's pretty much it. And don't try and belt the hide off a whip. Just practice nice and steady. Get your timing right. You know, I watched you this morning out there. You come with so much power, but your timing is so good. And that's what, you know, I think it's timing more than anything else. You know, just enjoy doing what you do. You know, Charlie was good for me in one or two ways. He taught me a lot, and, you know, he knew I was judging some camp drafts, and he said, how do you get on when you get in a confined space? How do you get out of that? You know, you can't go up over the top.
you're going to hit a wire, you know. And so Charlie just said, just bring it behind, bang, bang. And then he taught me how to retrieve it so it comes straight back into your hand. So you just go bang, flick, throw the whip straight onto your shoulder, and the next minute the fall's in your hand. Mm-hmm. And you look really neat. And things like that, you know, just they're things that you pick up and tricks that you're going to come across, you know.
So it was something on this trip. I don't know if we're going to make it to a camp draft. I know there's one happening in Koryong the next week. But so what's the use of a stock, or first a quick explanation of camp drafting, and then the use of the judge using a stock whip in camp drafting. What is that? Say a little bit about that.
Well, the only one that has a whip in camp drafting is the judge.
Okay.
It's just, you know, they've changed the course so much. It used to be, if I was running a course, it used to be about a 45-second course, and most of my courses were left hand. In Queensland, they're right hand, and then you just set the course. You've got various dimensions, but now they've opened the gate up so it flows a lot better, and you know, they're getting scores above 90. Well, to get a 90 once with great competitors like John O'Neill and Little Cody and things, it was a rarity because the course was much harder. Today, with the influence of the American quarter horse and with better breeding, I think the standard of the horses have improved, and certainly some of the riders. But what they need to do now is to make the course a little bit tougher so that there's more variation in the scoring. And
so is the whip crack, is that like a start signal for the horse and rider to start the course, or is that an ending signal?
Yeah, it's a horse and rider, and you know the rules are that you can have 2 goes. If you miss the first peg, you can come round again and get another one. And you know, the scoring is such that they have a yard score where the horse has got to block the beast to come out of the yard. So that's out of 30, and then you've got 26, yeah, and out of 26, and then you go to 4 course points, and then 66 for horsework, I think. So the total is 100, but you know, it's broken down, and it's pretty hard. It's, you know, today the standard is so good.
But then, so why does the judge have a stock whip, and again, why does he crack a stock whip?
No, the riders don't have.
The riders don't have a whip. The judge. So
the judge is the only one that has the whip. But
so what's the point of the whip crack in the event? Like why does the judge have a whip, and why does he crack a whip? What's the point of it?
You know,
because he's not just cracking it at random. I'm sure each whip crack there's a reason.
No, he's not cracking off a horse. The only one I've seen lately that can crack whips pretty decently off a horse is a fella from Tasmania, Walden. He's doing a pretty fair job.
Aaron Walden, yeah.
Yeah. I'd seen him on video, and I had Dan Hassett doing 4 corners off horses and things. But this young Walden, he impressed me a bit, cracking whips off a horse. I thought he's pretty good at it, and he's got some potential there.
All right, let me back up. So at the camp draft, why does the judge have a stock whip?
So he can crack them off, or if they run off course, or if they don't get out of the yard, he has the ability to crack them off.
Oh, to tell them like it's sort of like a disqualification signal.
Yeah, they run on a time course. It's on a time limit.
Yeah.
And the judge sets the time limit. Most of the time I would have set it at 45. But they can extend it to 50 or something, depending on the cattle a bit. Um, yeah, he just has the ability to crack you off. If you go a bit wide, if you go past the line of the gate to get your first peg, there's a set course. And if you run off course, or if you lose the beast or something, he usually just crack you off, bang.
Oh, so instead of like a buzzer, it's the stock whip crack.
Yeah, it's a super buzzer. You don't want to get it too many times.
Oh, so but if you're doing a run, if he cracks a stock whip, your run is done.
Yeah, your run is done.
You're over. Okay, yeah.
That's the end of the run. You're finished.
Oh, okay, got it. So that's the fun use to understand. Like the people always try to equate the whips as like some kind of super dangerous weapon, which they can be. But I try to explain to people the whips I use, which are based mostly on Australian style whips, is this main thing. I thought it was to make the sound that it's made it makes a noise.
I was fortunate enough to meet the greatest cowboy I've ever known, Larry Mahan, and he's 8 times champion of the world, 6 times all round, twice bull riding champion, won the aggregate in Saddle Bronc, set an arena record at the national finals in Saddle Bronc on a great bucking horse called Descent. And he was breaking in one day, and I told him there's an easier way of doing it, and he said, I'd like to see that. So I just showed him that you could bring horses up to the whip and crack whips all over them, and changes their personality a little bit, I can tell you, and changes anyone's. You don't want to get hit with one.
Mm-hmm.
You know how painful they are. Anyway, I gave him a pair of my whips to start with, and he started getting some lessons, and in the end he ended up pretty good too, I can tell you, because he was good with the rope as well. So that sort of really assisted him. And great rope spinners are good whip crackers like Vince Bruce.
Yeah, we're in Vince's
Yeah.
tradition. So it dawned on me to ask, because of your history with whip cracking, but also how long you've been in the police force, do you have any stories in Australia of a whip being used as a weapon, or for good or bad?
No, not really. The interesting thing, I'd seen other guys that run horse clinics and all the rest, and I watched one fellow hit a horse one day with a whip pretty severely. The difference between, if ever I broke a horse into the whip, I never hit him over the back or anywhere near his head or anything like that. Just flick them up behind the pasterns or behind the fetlock joints, just to get their attention, just a little clip. Even if they turn your back on you, you've got to be mindful of what they can do. And they're a dangerous thing in the wrong hands, as John Kelly said. And if you hit a horse over the rump or on the side with a whip, different to hitting cattle. Cattle, the mark will go away, but on a horse, it'll stay there forever. It's like a scar, I can remember once I was practicing and a bit of fall broke off the whip with a cracker and hit me back in the eye. I thought, and when I put my hand up, all this blood was running out, and I thought I'd lost my eye, but I hadn't. It was cracked. It just got me underneath. But the pain was excruciating, and it taught me the benefit of how much pain you could actually inflict if you ever wanted to. And I've never used one in any vicious sense. I can recall going to Warwick Rodeo once, and and I was having a drink at the bar with some friends, and there was a saddlery stand nearby, and a couple of drunk fellows were there, and one fella got a whip from the saddlery stand, and he said to his mate, light a cigarette and put it in his mouth, and he was going to crack it out.
Mm-hmm.
And when he cracked the whip, he striped it straight down over his head.
Mm.
I've never seen anyone sober up so quick in all my life, but the pain was excruciating, and I knew exactly what had happened. And I was in hysterics, and so was everyone else. But the guy that, received the punishment, he wasn't. But yeah, it's not something you want to hit someone with.
Right.
You can crack whips out off the body and wrap them round, as you know.
Yeah.
And they look effective, but yeah, no, I've never seen anyone get a hiding with one.
Mm.
In all honesty, and I don't think I'd ever like to hit anyone with one.
Mm, sure.
They're a great tool for the Australian stockman. At moving cattle, some things about American cowboys I really like, but there's stickers to tradition with their rope, and they like roping calves and dragging them up and branding them and going through that old Western deal. That's all part of their deal. But for me, I think the stock whip moves stock so much faster and better.
Mm.
I've moved big mobs of cattle on my own on one particular place, and I was fortunate they had good wide lanes, but I could go out and get a whole paddock full of cattle and just bring them straight down a lane, easy as pie with a whip.
Mm-hmm.
And you get better response out of cows and calves and all the rest. If you've got dogs or something and you're moving cattle and they've got calves, they'll come back and fight all the time. But stock whips, they don't. They just seem to poke along, and you can only go as fast as the slowest beast. But they're a great tool for the stockman.
Well, thanks so much for your time, Bob, and thanks for cooking me and Chris steaks earlier. I really appreciate it.
Pleasure, Adam, and enjoy your time out here, and I know you will.
Yeah.
And you're just a fantastic ambassador for whip cracking and plaiting, and I think you're number one.
Thank you very much, Bob. Bob Green, everybody.